that?
Well, that really was a devastating law for Mumia, for Kevin Cooper, for all death row prisoners, and really
For
what
Troy
it did
Davis.
for Troy Davis,
Mhm.
and for everyone trying with an innocence, claim trying to prove their innocence in the courts, because it limits your appeals, and it basically sets a bar so high that it's almost impossible to clear the hurdle and to be able to enter new evidence, to put new issues before the court, and it sets up barrier after barrier that really has been devastating, for these cases, and I think especially for people who are more recently sentenced to death row, and whose trials and cases are going to be coming up quicker and quicker, because there's almost 700 people on death row in California, and
It's outrageous.
it is outrageous, and even things that most people would agree should be heard by the court, things that most people would stop in a case and say, well, gee, it really seems like this guy's innocent, it really seems like this person should have a new trial, or this person should be set free. The courts say, well, that may be true, and sometimes they're not even disputing the facts, they're just saying it's too late. You waited too long to introduce this evidence.
Right, there
no
are
matter how obvious
procedure.
it
They're
is.
putting procedures.
That's
In other
right.
words, innocence matters not. What matters is if whether or not the procedures were followed by the judge, the sitting judge in the case. And if he did everything according to the rules and regulations, according to law, it doesn't matter if it comes out later, blatant evidence comes out later on that this man is innocent. They still will refuse to hear the case based on the fact that innocence is of no consequence.
Right, and I think that that's something that activists need to be talking about a lot and challenging, because it is a big part of Mumia and Troy and Kevin's cases, and saying, no, these things do matter, and innocence does matter, and we're not going to let you get away with executing innocent people just because you say that they shouldn't be allowed to introduce this evidence, and they shouldn't be allowed to continue with these appeals.
Talk a little bit about Kevin's original case and what happened and how he wound up in this situation.
Sure. Kevin remains on death row for something that he didn't do. He was accused of murdering a family and a house guest in 1983, and really the only reason, there were a few reasons that they went after him. One was circumstantial, that he was truly in the wrong place at the wrong time, being nearby the crime, not exactly when it happened, but within a time period of when it happened. And he was African American, and I believe that they really wanted to find, not find truly who perpetrated the crime, but find a scapegoat. And unfortunately for Kevin, he made an all too easy target for them. So even though anyone that looks at the case from a distance will say, this doesn't make any sense. How could one person kill 4 people and injure a fifth? It was a couple who were in their 40s. They were, they had guns in their house. They were people that you would think would have, put up a struggle, and you would think you would need more people to overcome them. There were multiple weapons used, which, anybody with a small amount of knowledge about these things would say, well, there were clearly multiple people there. The young boy in the family actually survived, and this is something that many people, I think, remember most about the case, is that he was badly injured, but he was able to communicate to several different people and say he saw Kevin Cooper's picture on television when they were looking for him and said that was not the person who killed his family. He said that it was 3 people with light skin, certainly not the sole person, African-American person, Kevin Cooper. And from there, the evidence, we could be here all night, to go through all of the evidence pointing towards 3 probably white people. There were people seen in a bar nearby that matched that description, people seen in the car that matched that description.
There were the bloody overalls.
And then that, I think, is one of the most really damning things, not pointing to Kevin, but pointing to somebody else, is that
Right.
a woman turns in coveralls with blood on them and
Right.
says, I think that my boyfriend had something to do with those, I think that he killed those people.
Wow.
And they threw them away.
Wow.
And they lied at trial and said, one person said that he destroyed them and that no one told him to, but then later they find out that actually he had a supervisor's signing off on destroying the coveralls. And the
I
person,
I hate to interrupt
Yes.
you, but I do have to open our live line before we run clean out of time.
Sure.
If you'd like to ask Crystal a question about the death penalty or Kevin or Mumia, call 621-4473. 621-4473. Go ahead.
and I don't want to get too much into the details of the case because it is a very complicated case, and people can read more
And
on
they
the
can
website.
go to the website. Yeah.
SaveKevinCooper.org has lots of articles and fact sheets and information.
Right.
But the bottom line is, in order to secure a conviction, they relied on faulty evidence, false evidence, planted evidence, tampered with evidence. And recently, in May, Kevin was denied by the Ninth Circuit, and but a dissenting judge wrote a dissent, which people should read, even though it's 100 pages.
That
but
opening statement.
he says that California may be about to execute an innocent man.
And a judge.
A judge, and he writes it. I couldn't have written it better myself. He writes 100 pages of all of what they have done to the evidence, what they have done to Kevin, detailing how every court has mishandled his case, and it's really shocking. I would challenge anyone to read that and not believe in Kevin's innocence.
Right. Well, I met Kevin, as I mentioned. I visited him before 2000 when the visiting room was open, and they weren't in a phone booth, and so we could talk freely, and it was wonderful meeting him. And his story would be sort of funny if it weren't so tragic. He was in a minimum security prison and saw a hole in the fence and thought, and he took off. Okay, and then he made it. After staying in the nearby house, which put him in the vicinity, he took off to Mexico, but foolishly came back to party and discovered that he was probably the most wanted man in California because he was an escapee. They targeted him, and they decided to pin this murder on him. So it's just so tragic that they've taken his life, so much of his life already. And talk about the fact that they almost took it in 2004, within an hour.
Right. He came very close to being executed in 2004, and that's something that he's written about, and I encourage people to read what he's written because to come so close, he was in the waiting room next to the death chamber, and I believe that it was only because of the movement that he wasn't executed, because of the movement of people.
It is the power of the people that will free all of these prisoners.
And demanding justice and bringing up the issues, and the court did intervene.